Thank you. As always, it's a real delight to be back in Broadway. Still think of this as home, but as we were sharing with some others this morning, it's actually been 29 years since my wife and I left Broadway to go to Zimbabwe. And that's quite a long time ago. So a little water's gone under the bridge since then. But it's good to see friends. Thank you for having us here to share what the Lord is doing around the world. Greetings from Cindy. She's not here. She's back in ministry in Ontario at our home church called Portico, and so she was unable to be with me. I'd be remiss if I didn't say to you as a church, thank you for your faithfulness in praying for Kevin and Julia as they went through their ordeal in China. Thank you for many of you who wrote letters to the Canadian government, to the Prime Minister, keeping the issue in front of them. We do appreciate what our government did. They were very active in this process, and Kevin and Julia had an opportunity to go and say thank you this week in Parliament and to express appreciation for the work. But we know that it's God who orchestrates all that. One of the MPs, a former cabinet minister, the MP from my riding in Toronto, actually said that she learned through this process that the power of prayer is greater than the power of politics. And when somebody bears witness like that, you know that they have seen the testimony of people through a very, very difficult time, and yet God has been glorified and honored through this entire process. So thanks for praying. As I think about that, in the book of Revelation, from chapter 6 to chapter 8, there's these scenes like a drama in which the seven seals are opened. It's like history is being unfolded before us. And when it gets to the seventh seal, it says, first of all, there is silence in heaven for 30 minutes. Heaven's going to be kind of a noisy place with drums and music and all kinds of good things that we enjoy. But there was silence to just give us a sense of the importance of what's happening. And what happens next is an angel comes with a golden censer, and the angel is given a lot of incense. And then it says the incense is mixed together with the prayers of the saints. The prayers of God's people, our prayers, are mixed together with the incense, and it says that they go up to heaven. And then all kinds of things happening, lightning and all kinds. Prayer makes things happen. From a human side, that which moves history is prayer. God has given us the privilege of participating with Him in His great plan in the world through our prayers and our faithfulness. I see you have a series coming up from your pastors on that. So come and listen to that because it's so vitally important, and it was very important in the story and chapter in Kevin and Julia's life. As a fellowship of churches across Canada, we collectively have 340 Canadian workers working in 60 different countries. With our associates and affiliates, more than 500 Canadians overseas, working with multiple partners, national leaders that we work alongside. A question I am often asked is, why do we send these people to dangerous places? A radio talk show host in Ontario asked one of our global workers who lived in a very dangerous place. He said, why do you live there? It's okay for you to go, but why do you take your wife and children and expose them to that kind of danger? Why do people like Kevin and Julia choose to make significant sacrifices and place themselves in significant danger in order to bring the good news of the gospel to people they don't even know? Why do we do that? I could tell you about obedience to calling, about Jesus telling us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, but I'm going to take a different tact in answering that question this morning. I have 3 videos which are going to share with you the first-hand stories from people who have been impacted because people chose to go and place themselves in danger for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Stories that remind us that there is much rejoicing in heaven when that which was lost is found. Jesus said, I came to seek and to save that which was lost. And when they come back to the Father, there is much joy in heaven. These are God's redemption stories. And they're what make me get up in the morning and keep persevering in the work that I do. And it's what keeps people like Kevin and Julie and Elia and Janet and others that I'll introduce. It's what makes them do what they do. But let me place this in the context of Scripture for just a quick moment. When Jesus began his ministry, he submitted himself to baptism. And when he came up out of the water, there are words of affirmation spoken over him. A voice from heaven, the Father says, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." These words address three fundamental needs that all of us as human beings have. The need for an identity, the need for security, and the need for significance and purpose. Identity, because we need to know who we are. We need to know that we're part of a family, a community. Let me tell you a story. I think I may have shared this with you before, but my wife loves to hear me tell this story. And she helps me when I travel. So I'm packing up all my things on a regular basis, and I travel a lot. And she says, "Do you have your passport? Do you have your US dollars? Do you have your toiletries? Is your underwear packed away?" She would go down the checklist. And one time I said, I really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of an expert at this. I do it all the time. To which she said, "Okay. Next trip, she doesn't ask the questions." I'm all prepared. She drives me to the airport, and as we're arriving at the airport, I have this terrible feeling that I forgot to check if I had my passport. And sure enough, I look in the bag, there's no passport. Because I'm an expert traveler, I don't do that 3 hours before you travel thing. I leave it to the last minute. It's 25 minutes home, 25 minutes back. I rush home. I get the concierge. I do have a few privileges. I can call people and say, "Please help me." And I call the concierge for Air Canada. I'm on my way to Thailand to visit Peter and Cavell Dove. And I get them on the thing and say, "Can you check me in? I'm coming. I have one bag. I will be there, but I forgot my passport." I arrived back at the airport after a very silent drive with my wife, Cindy. 10 minutes before the flight's to take off, and there's a guy waiting for me in the front, and he takes my suitcase. It goes one way, and I run the other way. I get through security, and by God's grace, I got on that airplane, and I sat down. And the first thing was I was very thankful I wasn't going home with Cindy that night, because that would have been a very long night. And secondly, I looked at that passport I had, and I realized, this is a really important thing. This tells me who I am. It's my identity. It identifies me. It says where I'm born. I can take this. This passport gets me where I want to go. Not everyone in this world has that same earthly privilege. But far more important than our earthly identity is my heavenly identity. We sang about it this morning. We are who he says we are. Our identity, our true identity, is determined not by our physical birthplace and our family name, but by our spiritual heavenly name that comes to us. He gives us his name, and he tells us who we are. That was a powerful song. I'd never heard that song before, Phil. That was outstanding, because the theology there is so rich. These same words that the Father spoke over Jesus, the Father wants to speak over every person in this world. Whosoever will come, he wants to bring back. He wants to speak words of life and affirmation. Isn't it a great thing in John 1:2 where it tells us, John 1:12, that we can be called the sons of God, that he gave us the right to become the children of God. Here's a story of 3 young ladies in Philippines who not only is their earthly identity and significance and security been transformed, but they have the hope of eternal life. Listen to them tell their story this morning.
When I was young, my father left us. He neglected us. And I was 10 years old that time. When I see really he packed his clothes and he is really leaving us.
When we were 6 months, our mother died. I came here, they brought me here at Noah's Ark when I was 10 months baby, and she was brought
here 12 months. So we were brought here because we are weak and malnourished.
I decided not to go to school. Then I decided to help my mother then in the farm. So I dropped from school, and then somebody saw my needs, and then she said that people can help me here in Banawi, and they said it's Noah's Ark. So when I heard that and they brought me here, I was jumping with joy, crying with joy because I told myself I can finish my dream.
The thing that most helped me from being a person who grew up in this place is the spiritual life, because it touches all the aspects of my life, social, emotional, everything. It really helped me. God is so amazing with all the people who help, from sponsors, from all other churches in other countries, and all people.
So why does a lady like Linda Veldhusen, who went to the Philippines originally for 1 year, has now stayed for over 20? Why does she do that? Well, because people like Donnie and Vicky and Zhenzhen have had their life destiny changed. That's the business we're in. That's what God's business is about. I can give you all the statistics about churches and all the churches that are being planted and thousands that are being saved. It always comes back to those individuals, those people whose lives are transformed because somebody obeys the Lord and goes. On that trip when I almost didn't make it because of my not listening to my wife, the lesson there is always listen to your wife. Even when she tells you things you already know, it's important to be reminded. I visited Peter and Cavell up on the Thai border with Burma, and these kids are up there. And I was really intrigued by one of the little programs they had. Many of these children, these refugees, they come across the border, many of them separated from their family. They don't know who they are. They've got no birth certificates, no identity papers. They're displaced. They're not really welcomed in Thailand as citizens. They're displaced. They're refugees. And yet, what Peter and Cavell has done is to come alongside them and to provide what they call life books. And so they would get testimonies, they'd find out who the children are, they'd get people and they would begin to write their stories and put them into this life book. And these actually become recognized by the United Nations as real identity papers, like their human passport, that helps them to have identity and significance. So in an earthly way, we have very practical ways that we serve people with issues of identity and security and significance. When my wife and I started the Villages of Hope over 20 years ago in Zambia, we were faced with a significant AIDS crisis that robbed children of parents and sometimes leaving them without family and without identity and without security. And for many of them, their hope for the future was really limited. What gives me great joy, and my role in this now is very limited. Nancy and Sergio Bersaglio from this church have been working for over 15 years of building up that ministry in a very significant way. But what gives me great joy is when I hear stories like this. Let me introduce you to Patricia here. This young lady here came to our Village of Hope in Zimbabwe when she was starting grade 8. Her father's late. Her mother was working just as what we call a domestic worker. She was just working in people's houses, trying to make a living. Her daughter was extremely bright and capable, but she was out at a school where there were too many children in the class. There weren't many facilities. And somebody asked if there was any way we could take this young girl into the Village of Hope, and somehow she came to us. And she, this year, received the MasterCard scholarship, full scholarship, and she is studying at Commerce and Accounting at McGill University in Montreal. And there she is. Isn't she lovely? God has changed her earthly destiny. But if you could meet her, she is a beautiful, vibrant follower of Jesus Christ. This next picture is Joseph. Joseph comes from our Zambian Village of Hope, and again, a difficult background, not of his own making, not even of his parents' making, just the difficulties of life. But came to our Village of Hope, did very well in school, went to the Copperbelt University, graduated, and received a scholarship to study mathematics at a graduate level in Beijing, China. So we had one couple who had to leave China, but we've got a young man back there from Zambia who thinks of himself as a missionary to China as he studies mathematics. So pray for him. But that's what gets me up in the morning and saying, hey, whatever it is that we have done along the way, whatever sacrifices, whatever investments we make, it's worth it because of young people like this. Ilya Bansiv grew up in Siberia in the mid-'80s. His family fled under the persecution that came to the church back in those days. And I'm going to show you a story here in just a moment that just reminds us that no one can snatch us out of God's hand when God has a purpose for our lives. Ilya and Janet faced incredible difficulty, significant opposition. The economic conditions were harsh. Their living conditions were very Spartan. They lived in an apartment, and the drug problem in Siberian Russia in those days was out of this world. They would have people shooting up in the stairwells just outside their doors. Sometimes they'd come home at the end of the day and have to step over people. And so as well as starting a terrific church, they started a ministry to drug addicts and alcoholics. And if I could tell you all the stories of redemption, I would, but I'm going to show you one story. This is Pasha's story. And this is a story of what God does when he redeems people by his grace.
There are 7.5 million registered drug addicts in this country. The man who is in charge of the force that fights drugs in the government, this man says this number needs to be multiplied by 2. So 15 million drug addicts. That's not just a problem, that's an epidemic. Our mission is to bring hope within reach of every addict so that if they want, they can receive that help. This brother, his name is Pasha. He was a desperate drug addict.
До 2002 года я употреблял наркотики различные. Неоднократно сидел в тюрьме. Вот, моя жизнь, она была полностью разрушена. Мое здоровье, моя семья. Здесь я начал употреблять наркотики. Я не знаю, с чем сравнить. Я просто каждый день мучился, мне было плохо. Мне нужны были наркотики. Однажды я зашел домой, и там сидел отчим, мама, а моя младшая сестра. И я зашел с ножом и забрал все вещи, которые у них были дорогие.
His mother was afraid of him. And finally she just couldn't handle life anymore with Pasha. And she asked for their friend, who is a hunter, to take him on a hunting trip and kill him in the winter in the forest.
Когда я пошел ночью в лес с одним мужчиной, с одним мужиком, он взял с собой карабин, нож. Это естественно для охотника. Когда мы зашли в лес, он потерялся из вида, и было очень темно, у меня не было ни фонаря, ничего.
The hunter was supposed to shoot him, he couldn't pull a trigger.
Ну, каким-то чудесным образом я кричал его, не мог найти. Я просто наткнулся на него. Пошел в какую-то сторону, сам не видел, просто наткнулся на этого мужика. Он сидел на корточках. Мы пришли домой, я так и не понял, зачем мы ходили. И потом мне признались, что от меня хотели просто избавиться.
Well, Pasha was so hurt and so angry with his mother and his stepfather. And he said, they wanted to kill me, I'm gonna kill them. Suddenly, his mother hears the gospel. She gets saved and she gets filled with the Holy Spirit. She got so bold that she actually went and found her son in one of those drug-infested areas. And she begins preaching to him and says, Pasha, you need Jesus.
Если раньше она не хотела со мной встречаться, и когда она видела меня возле подъезда, она специально ждала, пока я куда-то уйду. И также мой отчим, он не хотел вообще со мной иметь никаких взаимоотношений. Но я увидел, что что-то поменялось в матери. Она стала приходить ко мне, она перестала меня бояться. Только Бог мог, я не знаю, столько зла я сделал. Я 2 раза обокрал мать, вынес все самое дорогое из квартиры. Так ее обзывал, мучил, и я пытался как-то отомстить ей. Отчима обкрадывал сколько раз.
When he saw his mother so bold, he says, wow, something happened to her. I better go check it out. And so he said he went for the first time to church, and he said he felt such peace.
Когда однажды я просто сам стал бояться, потому что что-то начало происходить со мной.
And finally he came to us and he said, please, I need help. I heard that you have a program. Can you take me in? And we took him in.
Мало того, я не хотел бросать наркотики, но то отношение, которое я увидел в центре, оно, конечно, начало меня исцелять. Естественно, это молитва, общение со мной.
And so he went through the program, and now he is the director of the Source of Life, which is a Teen Challenge program in Novokuznetsk.
Не думаю, но иногда я прокручиваю эти моменты все и понимаю, что да, действительно, я не должен был жить в тот день, моя жизнь должна бы оборваться. То есть это действительно чудо, это было все прощено, все стерто.
God changes lives, eh? Isn't that great? Why have Ilya and Janet stayed in Siberia for over 20 years? That's why, right there. That's what gets you up in the morning and says, we have got to persevere in bringing this good news of the gospel, which is so life-transforming, that we need to bring it to all. This verse says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nation. God has a purpose for people's lives, and if they will submit their life to Christ, that purpose becomes a reality. I have one more short video to show you. This is the story of Maya. Elmer and Sherry Comont have pastored in numerous different churches in Africa. Lusaka, in Mombasa, in Kigali, Rwanda after the genocide. They're terrific pastors. Recently, they went to Burundi, to Bujumbura, and Burundi is still a country that's experiencing a lot of turmoil, difficulty. There was an attempted coup last year, and the political tension there is still high, and the economic challenges are great. But the young lady you see there in green, her name is Maya. And Maya and her parents were refugees from Burundi. They went down to Zambia. And it's in Zambia that she actually found the Lord. She will tell you herself that she, at one point as a young girl, had thoughts of suicide. She thought her life was meaningless. But by God's grace, she got to a church that had been previously planted by Elmer and Sherry. She found the Lord. She became a music leader. She sings like an angel. She's got a beautiful voice and a very effervescent personality. And the Lord called her to go back to Burundi, and in God's sovereignty brought her together with Elmer and Sherry to be a part of a new church plant. And I'm just always amazed how God orchestrates the lives of people, because He has set us apart from birth for that which He wants us to do. And so just listen to Maya's story, and then I'll close.
My name is Maya K. Lambert Matasi. Most people just call me Maya. I'm also a member of Christian Life Ministries under the leadership of Elmer and Sherry Coleman. My story started in Burundi. I was born here in 1989. In 1993, the First Civil War started, and my family was forced to seek refuge in Zambia. It was just really hard to make it as a foreigner. You would not get the same opportunities. You'd not be able to get a job. My mother found it so hard to cope with the challenges of being in a new country. At some point that hit her so hard, she felt like her life had just been wasted, and she turned to drinking alcohol to just try to forget all that. So that really affected my childhood. I found myself taking up this role of a mother, taking up responsibilities when she was not around. I felt like my parents didn't love me, and that I would never turn out to be anything good because of that environment. I realized that if my friends couldn't accept me, if they couldn't love me, if my family doesn't love me or doesn't accept me, then life is just not worth living. That was when it started to bring thoughts about suicide in my head. And so one night, it so happened that I was listening to a Christian radio station, and someone started to speak as though they were telling my story. And they shared about how God could use someone who thinks that their life doesn't mean anything or nothing good could come out of it. I told God that night, if you can use my life, then take it. I joined a church, a local church called Gilgal Mission Center. It was just so deep. I mean, they were such a prayerful church, so spiritually challenging, and I wanted to just grow and pursue God. It was during that season that God really started to put in my heart, Burundi. I went to work for a bank, but it was there again that I was reminded that, my calling wasn't in all that, but it was in ministry. One day I walk into the bank and I see this elderly man and elderly woman. And they told me they're coming to plant a church in Burundi, an English-speaking church. And I told them that I was a worship leader and that I used to go to a church in Zambia called Gilgal. Their faces changed. What? Gilgal? They shared with me that they had planted the church. So when they said that, I knew that I was brought to Burundi by God. For me, it has been a journey of restoration and healing. I am so happy to be a part of this amazing story, and I'm more than excited about all the things that God has to do through Elmer and Sherry for Burundi and for everyone at large. Yeah.
So why do we, as a fellowship of churches across Canada, continue to ask our churches to partner with us invest, send people around the world, it's because the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is life-changing, life-transforming. We want all of God's children to find their identity in Him, their security in Him, and their ultimate significance and purpose with Him. So that's why we do this. And that's why we ask you as a church to keep a global focus. Reach Vancouver, but reach the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. God bless you this morning. Thanks, Phil.